We good to go?
Yeah.
Let's do this. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us in the eye of a firestorm between one fire that's hit us and anticipating a crazy wind event, what they're calling historic and dire, coming up on Saturday. I want to thank, first of all, the Governor Newsom, Tom Porter, Cal Fire, Mark Ghilarducci, all of our elected representatives. We've got McGuire here, our state senator, Jim Wood. We got the mayor of Hillsburg, city manager, Celeste, our public health official here in Sonoma County, our Congressman Jared Huffman, our Sheriff Mark Essick, and many more. Susan Gorn, it's great to see you, my colleague here. This is the team that's deploying, and I want to first of all thank the state because they have sent the Armada. We have a fleet out there right now going after the fire, the Kincaid fire, in a way that it needs to be done in the next 2 to 3 days to prepare for another wind event, which is really making us bristle a little bit. But at the same time, we've had the partnership and the resources deployed. And I've had a lot of people who have told me out of all the incidences they've seen, they have not seen this kind of force come in and this kind of coordination. So having gone through this 2 years ago and you coming out with us, it's a crazy time to say, here we are again, but we are more prepared than ever. You can tell by the sense on the ground and the individuals, there's not that same frenzy that was there before, but at the same time, this is going to test us. So we're in a situation right now. Thank you for being here and taking a lead on an issue that none of us decide to be leaders on, but we have to embrace and go with. So I'm going to pass it on over to the governor, and thank you all so much.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thanks for all your leadership, and let me thank the elected officials assembled behind me, but more importantly, let me thank the men and women out on the front lines that are keeping you safe and doing heroic work. Not only those that wear the badge of your local jurisdiction and the state, CAL FIRE, but folks that are providing mutual aid from all throughout the state of California and from outside of the state of California. I was just down in Southern California, a new fire sparking in San Diego. We are monitoring 2 fires in Los Angeles County and 2 fires here in Northern California, though the Muir fire seems to be substantially under control. The biggest concern, obviously, in the northern part of the state is Kincaid. And while we are enjoying a moment of respite away from the wind events, as the supervisor said, we're expecting those winds to whip back up on Saturday evening into Sunday, potentially dissipating, we hope, on Monday. And so the expectation of these now commonly referred to PSPS, the de-energization, is likely to occur at scale again into the weekend, despite the fact that now we're down to about 6,700 customers that are currently de-energized in the PG&E territories. So this is multifaceted. We are a nation state, so we are conducting ourselves all across this state by allocating appropriate resources, and as the supervisor said, we've never had more resources in this space than we do today. We'll be bringing in 747 into the area for exclusive use in the state of California. You'll see that aircraft in the very near future, meaning in the next number of hours. We've got our DC-10s up there. We've got other suppression equipment in the air. Those that often don't see that suppression in the air should just know this. There's a reason. It's not because we're neglecting. It's because of conditions that are not appropriate for those aircraft. Not only the issues of suppression in the air related to wind conditions or literally clarity issues, inversion, in that layer where you need to get low, and if you can't actually get low, there's no point in bringing those aircrafts up. But that does not deny the work that's being done underneath, the hand crews that are out there, the bulldozers that are out there, and the lines that are being drawn in and around the fire to contain it. We have the best and the brightest in this business. And that's not a governor saying that. I'm not paid to say that. It's not because I think that. It's because I know that, because I've had the experience. You had the experience here in the North Bay. I've seen it firsthand. Some of the finest folks that exist in the business doing heroic work, and they are preparing for Saturday night. They're preparing for Sunday, and they are working with meteorologists. They're working with data that's state-of-the-art. They're working with new LiDAR technology, new radar technology, new satellite technology, and working with our federal partners, not just our local partners, in concert to develop strategies and to map and anticipate the movement of not only the Kincaid fire, but the other fires, the Tick fire in particular in Los Angeles County, that obviously are posing most of the anxiety and concern. I don't want to go back, but I do think it's important to remind folks of some of the preparation. It's been interesting, the coverage that was given, though understandably it was given, to the new technologies we're rolling out on cameras. We have substantially increased our investment in last year's budget, and we are expecting to significantly enhance that in future years for more technology that allows that early detection through these cameras. You saw the specific benefits of that camera in the Kincaid fire in terms of allowing us earlier response times and the like. But we also were aided by pre-positioning. We put an historic amount of money this year to pre-position assets all around the state. We were the beneficiary of that pre-positioning here. And as a consequence, I think mitigated what may have been an even more extreme event, one, again, we continue to manage as we speak. And that is complementary to those assets that include new Black Hawk helicopters, $109 million in the budget for procurement of those helicopters, new C-130s, 7 of them that we have procured that are now being rolled into the fleet. It will take some time to implement the inclusion of that entire fleet, but those assets are now underway. Those investments have been made. Historic vegetation management investments, proactive efforts to address the vulnerabilities of 200 communities in this state through some forest management and vegetation management techniques that required me to declare an emergency before an emergency, and that work is being complemented by the National Guard. We took off a political operation on the border to Mexico and brought a substantial number of the National Guard to complement our hand crews and our vegetative management work. And by the way, thank you to the National Guard for the extraordinary work they're doing, and they continue to provide resources that are pre-positioned as well and will aid and abet our efforts. I want to thank the Department of Justice and their work to address issues that we consider at these moments. Price gouging, people that take advantage of vulnerable communities, people that make runs on groceries and gas. We want to make sure that they're safe, people are being respectful, people aren't panicking, but also that people aren't taking advantage of this situation. We are working with California Chamber, and we are working with our business agency, referred to as GoBiz, to make sure that people are aware that people are still open for business in this community, that we want to continue to see commerce, we want to continue to see tourism as is appropriate in certain areas, and we are mapping that out and promoting the same. We are working double time to address the issue of health and safety. Our Department of Health and Human Services working with the counties, working with the cities to make sure the most vulnerable are reached out to, wellness visits, efforts at the local level, working with the hospitals to make sure people are appropriately taken care of. This remains a vexing issue and a top priority for all of us. Accordingly, we are working to provide resources for those that have had business interruption and those individuals that have lost their homes. I just visited a number of structures that were destroyed, a familiar sight to all of us, devastating sight to those impacted, lives literally torn asunder, and we wanted to make sure that they have quick access to cash and reimbursements. I want to compliment and thank the President of the United States, Donald Trump, for his quick actions through FEMA on securing our what we call FMAG, which allows initially 75% of our costs associated with these efforts to be reimbursed. We want to compliment their willingness to engage as quickly as they did. As a consequence of that, and the consequence of the 2 emergency declarations that I've announced here in Sonoma County and in Los Angeles County, we are moving as expeditiously as we can. Final point, and then we'll get you the folks in uniform, the experts that you came here to get updated on those 16,000 acres and that 5% containment on the Kincaid fire in particular. But that is the issue of resources that the state anticipated in a circumstance like this. I want to compliment Senator McGuire, Assemblyman Wood, for their leadership, their stewardship, for their steadfastness, for their demands of me and their colleagues to prepare for this wildfire season, because they've had enough as representatives of this community. We put $75 million up in the budget to anticipate these blackouts. Today, we're announcing that we are distributing those funds. $26 million is now being made available immediately for counties. Counties like those, the two representative supervisors are responsible for. Those dollars will be base grants depending on population. Those that have been impacted by blackouts will have additional resources, and then we'll have the ability to provide proportional resources based upon need, up to $26 million immediately. We are providing money as well to the big 13 cities, $500,000 base grants, and additional resources above that based on the discretion of our Office of Emergency Service. Also, tribal lands. We were just up at River Rock, which, by the way, did a heroic job keeping their structures safe, and, by the way, keeping other structures safe. They have a 1 million-gallon well up there, or at least, I guess, cistern of sorts, or storage capacity, which we were able to utilize and draw down. There were resources there overnight getting the benefit of their work. We're providing money for our tribal lands as well. And then reimbursements, tens of millions of dollars for state agencies so they can move quickly to address the needs in a discretionary manner for communities impacted by these blackouts, impacted by this disruption. So that's a broad strokes overview. I want to again just thank the extraordinary heroism of the men and women that are out there on the front lines. I want to thank all the complementary agencies for their hard work. I want to thank the elected officials for their steadfastness and their stewardship. And I want to once again say this: we should not have to be here. Years and years of greed, years and years of mismanagement, particularly with the largest investor-owned utility in the state of California, PG&E. That greed has precipitated in a lack of intentionality and focus on hardening their grid, undergrounding their transmission lines. They simply did not do their job. It took us decades to get here, but we will get out of this mess. We will hold them to an account that they have never been held in the past. We will do everything in our power to restructure PG&E so it is a completely different entity when they get out of bankruptcy by June 30th of next year. We will hold them accountable for the business interruption and costs associated with these blackouts, and we will do the same with the other two investor-owned utilities in Southern California. We have a new president of the PUC. She was up in Redding having public hearings, and she will take them to task. Mark my word, it is a new day of accountability, a new day of transparency. But I cannot look any of you in the eye and honestly say that we can snap our fingers and address a decade of mismanagement. And while I have been here 9 months, unfortunately I have not been here 9 years. And I will do my best to make sure that we are never again in this position. But I do want folks to know the kind of investments that are necessary will take a little bit of time. But with all due respect, not 10 years. This is not the new normal. This cannot continue. The system simply cannot absorb it. But nonetheless, we have to recognize we are living in a new world, particularly in a state like ours. After a 5-year historic drought, after 15 of the 20th most destructive fire seasons just since 2000, because of climate change, yes, because the hots are getting hotter and the dries are getting drier and the wets are getting wetter, which has aided and abetted these grass fires because of those rains that went later into the season, now that are drying up. We have a unique responsibility and obligation to do more and better than any other jurisdiction anywhere in the United States of America. We'll meet that moment, but please understand that moment cannot happen overnight, but I recognize it can't happen too soon. And we are resolved, and we are collectively rowing in the same direction. So that's my long-winded preamble. I know you all got that edited already. But now let me ask the head of the Office of Emergency Service to update you on some more technical issues that I imagine you're interested in, and also then ask the chief of CAL FIRE to come up as well to talk a little bit more about how we're pre-positioned and how we are preparing for this weekend. Mark and Chief?
As he comes up, one thing real quickly that we were going to do is queremos también agradecer a todos que están representando la comunidad latina. Hay algunos de nosotros que se puede estar disponible para entrevistas y otras cosas después. Tenemos muchos recursos y aquí bien cerquita también hay un centro comunitario en la ciudad de Hillsburg donde hay mucha gente que habla en español como primer lengua, y eso es uno de las cosas las cosas que está mejor esta vez que hace 2 años, es hay mucho más integración entre las comunidades. So I just wanted to say that to anybody. We're working better and faster with multilingual community, and that's one of the things we wanted to relay to everybody. Thank you.
Chief Porter?
Thank you, Governor. So on the fire, I'm not going to give a full briefing on the fire. We can cover that on separate pieces and parts and questions as we move on. What we do know is that we're about 21,900 acres as of this morning, 5% contained. We're working diligently on closing the doors that are still open on this fire. There's still a lot of open line. We have bulldozers, hand crews, all working to put line in to bring those containment numbers up. But with wind coming back to us, we're very concerned that we not only get line in, but also have line that we can hold. So it's a fluid process right now. The fire is not moving a lot today, but it is just because we're in this kind of transition period and we're worried about the winds resurfacing. What I wanted to also spend a little time, the governor just mentioned, we have put the 747 global supertanker on contract for California exclusive use. There are now 3 very large air tankers, 2 DC-10s and the 747, all available to California. We are looking at what the next week has in store for us. We're going to have weather that's going to continue to give us challenges. It's going to give us challenges no matter what the spark is. So we have also our assets that we're working through the California National Guard and the governor's direction to have remote sensing capabilities to tell us when and where fires are starting 24/7. Also making sure that we can get to fires early and get resources there, put them out before they get big. We have been putting out more than 95% of the fires that are happening in California for the last several days at 10 acres or less. We have been very active. There are a few that have escaped. This is the kind of situation and season when those fires can happen. We're all aware of that. So we have upstaffed. We're working with local government. Director Ghilarducci will mention some of the local government assets that we're bringing in, the pre-positioning. But all of this is a concert. Ground resources, air resources, remote sensing, cameras that we're adding to the camera fidelity across the state through the governor's budget. All of these things are helping us to get better fidelity and get resources to where they need to be to protect lives and property. It's important for everybody to understand this is the time of year when the fire starts that we can't put out in that early stage. It's going to start running in a direction, and we're going to have to evacuate. You have to work with your local, listen to your local law enforcement and fire officials, and when they say it's time to go, it's time to go. We have ready, set, go. You better be set right now. Have your go bag ready. When you're told to go, go. This is life and safety that we're talking about, and it needs to happen then. With that, I'm going to turn over the mic to Director Ghilarducci.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon. So a couple things I want to mention. We have really, as a result of the fire weather conditions that are now really statewide, we're seeing hot, dry, windy conditions, red flag conditions throughout the state. We've had to really lean in and respond in probably the largest way we have ever done. The governor mentioned a number of ways we're looking at situational awareness to drive all of that intelligence into the State Operations Center so that we can try to stay out in front of these evolving crisis situations. Now, we understand that the PSPS is an element that is making it more complex. And we know that we're coming off of a PSPS here shortly, but we're going to go into another PSPS event coming up here Saturday evening into Sunday, and that may last a little bit longer. And so those are elements of a symptom of a larger problem that we're dealing with, and that is the fire weather and the red flag conditions. These are dangerous conditions, and we want everybody, as the chief said, to take very, very close attention to that. The State Operations Center in Sacramento and all of our regional operations centers are all fully active or remain fully activated 24/7 through the remainder of next week. We are in close coordination with all of our fire mutual aid assets. I want to highlight Chief Gosner from Santa Rosa Fire, who's here, and our police chief from Santa Rosa, Ray Navarro, who's here, as well as our board supervisor chair, David Rabbit. We're working with all of these entities, local and state, and even our federal partners, to ensure that we have all the resources in place for these events. As Chief Porter mentioned, the goal is to try to keep these fires as small as possible. Part of that, the governor mentioned, was a allotment of funds in a new program to pre-position fire assets that are from local government and from state OES. And we have those. We have pre-positioned those assets. They're specialized strike teams or task forces here within Sonoma County, as well as in Marin County and in Napa County, and in Alameda County, so that these strike teams of engines can be immediately deployed to new starts. They're an augmentation of the existing forces that are on the ground. And I really want to give a shout out to our state fire and rescue mutual aid system, our local fire agencies that participate in that state program and are augmenting. We're approaching this like a battle, and we have to really think about it as strategically as possible in our ability to get resources. That's good intelligence, situational awareness, good communications, and having the right resources on the ground. And as Chief Porter mentioned, a lot of that is the responsibility of each and every one of the citizens. Be prepared, be aware, have your equipment, your supplies ready to go, and if told to evacuate, do so. During a PSPS event, there are going to be conditions where gas stations may not have power. You should be thinking about that now, having your cars fueled up and ready to go. You should have a family plan, a communications plan, power for your devices, very important. Understand that there is extensive law enforcement capabilities within the county, as well as through our mutual aid system. We have also tasked the California Highway Patrol to upstaff personnel for security throughout the power outage area. And we don't want you to make runs or get into conflicts at gas stations or at food stores. Think through that now and plan accordingly to be prepared for when these events happen. This is really sort of an unprecedented place that we are in as a state. But as the governor said, we will get past it and we will get through it together in an effort to be able to be better as we move out through the other side of this. Okay, who am I going to now?
Okay. Well, we'll just, why don't we bail ourselves to any questions, and you can have at any of us.
I'm wondering if you could give us more of a description of what you saw. Did you get a chance to get up a hill?
Yeah, we saw, I mean, just smaller versions of what has become all too familiar up here from 17 and 18. And that's homes completely destroyed, cars that look like they've been in a war zone, and everything all but melted down except a few curious items. Right next door, a home that's completely untouched. And just the remarkable, just serendipity that is a fire. Then again, there are some that make perfect sense because defensible spaces were provided, there was more green, people had focused on perhaps upgrading some of their materials on their roof, on their decks and the like. But we at this moment, and this is a number that will change, we have 21 structures, individual residential structures rather, that have been impacted, and 28 outbuildings. So yeah, so 28 outbuildings, 21 residential structures that we know of at this moment that have been destroyed. You see vineyards that have been impacted, obviously tremendous amount of land. We'll assess the wildlife damage. But it's a big area, and there are a lot of hot spots still, and there's still a lot of suppression work that's needed. But we are benefiting because of this respite of the winds, and so people are out there as aggressively as they can be for this moment.
Governor, PG&E has said that they're not going to reimburse folks for their losses.
Well, we'll see. That's what they say. I'm not convinced that that's what they'll end up doing. We have a lot of tools in our toolkit: the Public Utilities Commission, a bankruptcy judge, a federal judge by the name of Judge Alsop, public opinion, morality, ethics, good business practice, judgment. All those things are on our side.
Governor, you talked about restructuring PG&E, but does that mean the state would take over? What options are you?
Well, that's through the bankruptcy process. In order to come out of bankruptcy, they're trying to recapitalize. They have people from Wall Street that are trying to make a bid. Elliott Management's one of them, well known. They're doing their own internal bid. There's people that are looking at their assets, potentially break them up, gas division versus electric division. Cities like San Francisco are making bids. San Jose, the mayor said he was interested in making bids. So all these things are happening, and that's all part of this bankruptcy process. That's all part of them emerging out of bankruptcy. And my hope is, not just my hope, but our efforts have been focused for many, many months as we've reached out to potential bidders to see more people enter this space and provide creative strategies to modernize this entity and determine whether or not it's simply too big.
But there's no specific plan yet.
Oh, there are details that have been laid out. Specific plans have been presented to the bankruptcy judge. Take a look.
Meant from the state.
The state is not making a bid to purchase PG&E. If that's the question, that is not currently on our agenda. That being said, I said currently on the agenda.
Governor, as part of your tour, was there any discussion about PG&E potentially one of the transmission lines maybe being responsible for the
Well, I'd lie if I said there wasn't a discussion. There was a discussion, but I would also be errant if I said that discussion was conclusive, meaning that determination and investigation was complete. It is neither determined nor is that investigation complete.
Just for clarification, you said that we wouldn't be here with not for years and years of mismanagement on the part of PG&E. Were you talking about this fire we're in right now, or are you talking about
This moment in our history where millions of people are impacted throughout the state. But again, I just want to paint a picture because this is the northern part of the state. In Southern California, not dissimilar experience, just not at the scale and scope. Edison is turning off the power. San Diego is turning off the power. San Diego's been doing it since 2007. Interestingly, the new San Diego fire is now occurred in and around where that 2007 fire occurred, where a lot of lessons were learned. I grant San Diego Gas and Electric this. No other utility, arguably in the country, is more successful in their strategies for de-energization. But it is a tool in their toolkit. But they are able to do it with precision, a scalpel, versus the scope and scale of PG&E because they've made investments, because they've been more intentional on focusing on you and public safety over them, bonuses, and shareholders. And that's the fundamental contrast between the way they operate and the way Pacific Gas and Electric has operated over the last few decades.
Governor, Sonoma County in particular has been decimated by fires in the past 2 to 3 years.
that's why we're up here, and I'd encourage you to rewind everything that was just said in terms of our proactive efforts to pre-position assets, the extraordinary work that everybody you see around me is doing to make sure people are protected and people are made safe. The work that's been doing, people are knocking on every door, looking at every structure. They're tagging those structures to see if they're safe. They're out there doing everything they possibly can. You're going to see more assets as the air clears up. The wind now is dying down, more assets in the air. You've got bulldozers out there. You've got line crews out there. They are already proactively anticipating where the weather is going, the wind conditions, what they'll look like. It is remarkable, our ability to predict with precision the acuity of those winds, the gusts, and then map out and anticipate how best to utilize our resources today so that we can protect people tomorrow.
Governor, the CEO of PG&E, in response to your criticism about the power shutoff, said the state should take over that authority. It should be the state responsibility.
That would be called, Phil, a bailout. It doesn't surprise me that PG&E is looking for a bailout. We will not bail out PG&E.
Governor, there are thousands of folks in Sonoma County who just lost power and now planning to lose power again. What would you tell them about how long they should expect to live like that?
Well, they should be outraged. They should be infuriated. And they should direct their ire at the mismanagement of Pacific Gas and Electric, who for decades have created conditions that led to this moment. That said, what we're anticipating right now, we're down to about, 6,700 customers that are currently de-energized, and we should expect most of those customers to get back on today, probably at the latest, few, I imagine, scattered tomorrow. But we expect more power outages Saturday evening at the moment into Sunday, hopefully turning back on Monday. And we are doing everything in our power to mitigate the scale and scope of that and to make sure that they turn back the power on as quickly as they can. Let me, on that subject, make a point that's important to make. When the determination to turn back on power is made, you can't do it unless you investigate the lines to make sure that they're safe. And that takes time. What we have done, so you know where the state has been, we are providing air resources, infrared technology, so even during nighttime, the California Highway Patrol and its planes can do a lot of that investigation to supplement the work that's being done by PG&E, all in an effort to, as quickly as humanly possible, get those lights back on.
Have you given PG&E any kind of ultimatums in terms of making the lines safe enough where they don't have to do these kinds of wires?
They have specific prescriptive ultimatum. I would encourage you to go back to the legislation we passed in July, which was historic and a heroic effort to get ahead of ourselves before the fire season. In that legislation are specific, measurable roles and responsibilities that we all will play, the state, Public Utilities Commission, the IOUs, the city and counties with support from the state, but more importantly, the utilities themselves that have a $5 billion obligation to invest in public safety, hardening, undergrounding, vegetative management, et cetera, including technology that allows them more precision to de-energize without having to turn off a switch where the entire house goes out, but one room at a time. All of that is laid out in that legislation, legally required if they're ever to access the capital that we're willing to put up to help PG&E get out of bankruptcy and secure the other IOUs so that they can go out in the bond markets with higher ratings and be able to access capital to complete their improvements. I don't mean to complicate this, but we spent 6 months on a daily basis working to put together that package, and I cannot impress upon you more to look at what now is required. We're not reacting to this moment. We specifically laid out a framework and a direct pathway for them to get back to solvency and get back into the business of being a good business. Anybody else?
Could you or the chief talk a little bit more about the complications you're facing fighting the fire when you don't have power? How that makes it difficult?
I'll leave that to the expert.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for the question. So fighting the fire with power shutoff, it doesn't change a lot of the firefight itself. Communication flow, and particularly communication flow with the public, is where the bulk of the challenge is. Sonoma has worked diligently to better inform the public through early morning systems. And so some of that is happening here Some of that still needs to be built out and brought to bear in other parts of the state. But in general, the actual act of firefighting is not a difficult process with the power out. We usually are fighting fire with the power out because fires take out the power as well. There is something that's important to know, though. We have critical infrastructure for firefighting that when there's no power makes it difficult to do. For instance, retardant plants at air bases. They require power to churn and mix the retardant, pump it into the airplanes that drop the retardant. The important thing here is that we know this. We put generators in place, we're ready to go. So we flip the generator on, we mix the retardant, we pump the retardant. Doesn't matter if the base is out of power. So these are things that the state has leaned forward. We've been working with the utilities, understanding that this was going to happen potentially over the last 8 or 10 months, and knowing that there are places where we're going to have to do those kind of things. We have, and that is how we're getting around some of the power-related issues.
Hey, Chief, I had a question. I was talking to a couple of firefighters the other day who mentioned they were having some difficulty accessing water because there are a lot of private water sources as opposed to in a municipality they can just tap into. Can you speak to that?
And that is a typical issue when we're talking about wildland fire. Wildland fire is different than municipal fire, and we have had fires running into municipal areas. It's part of the reason we need to get people out of the way, because we're not just fighting a fire in a structure that might spread to another structure. We're talking about a conflagration that's coming into a town. People need to be out of the way. We can't ensure that we're going to be able to save every one of those structures. We're going to try, but we can't ensure. Number one is people, lives, and property. Second. Then, so the water source is something that we often deal with, and it's not something new to us. There are certain systems that require power to remain charged and keep the tanks full that then enter the system. And we are adept at working through that. Doesn't change the fact that there could be a group of firefighters that are trying to find water during an event, and they may not be able to do that or may not be able to find sufficient water. But that is something that we deal with regularly, and we adapt and overcome.
Last question.
Can I take advantage of this question being posed to the sheriff proactively? Because, Sheriff, we want to anticipate Saturday night,
Yes.
Sunday, and what we should expect from a public safety perspective and how you guys are doing heroic work.
Thank you. My name is Mark Essick. I'm the sheriff of Sonoma County. So some of the things that we've taken proactive steps on to deal with power outages is kind of going back to the older style. We've equipped all of our patrol cars with the high-low siren. So we are able to get out into neighborhoods, knock on doors, and do evacuations without having to have technology, without having to have power. So that's the most basic step we've taken. We've really leaned into that. Currently, we have over 50 deputies in the Geyserville area and the hills east of Geyserville. They are there right now to help people evacuate. They're there to answer questions, be there for them, provide direction, and when the time comes, to use those high-low sirens to evacuate people.